well, this is it. This is where I quit. See, I was only 5 days into the trip, but I was done. I had officially reached my limit. It was July 7th, 2002, and it was the day before my 21st birthday. See, when you turn 21, you're supposed to do something really fun, really epic, and I had decided that what I really needed was an adventure. Something really challenging, something I could be really, really proud of, and so I had signed up for a NOLS course. NOLS stands for National Outdoor Leadership School, and that's exactly what it is. It teaches you leadership through outdoor wilderness excursions. And I had signed up for the Wind River Wilderness course, which was supposed to be a month-long backpacking excursion through the Wind River Range in Wyoming. And we were going to traverse and climb and hike around all of those glacier-carved ridges and peaks. And you know what? Every day had been physically demanding. Every day had been tough. My life in Texas had not prepared me for those ascents. I was out of shape. And it was really, really hard every day. Every day we'd wake up at about 5:30 and we'd cook breakfast and then we'd clean the pots and the pans and we'd break camp down and we'd pack it all back up into these 70-pound packs. And then we'd move all throughout the day to our next spot, to our X on the map. And then we'd set up and we'd do it all over again. And every day we had a plan. And every day we'd hike on average about 10 miles with some pretty steep elevation gains. And so it had been hard, but nothing compared to day 5. See, that day had started out just like every other one had been. We'd gotten up, we had a plan, we had an X we were going to reach on a map. But somehow we'd gotten turned around, and somehow we were not where we thought we were. And so right when we were getting to what should have been the end of our day, we found out that we were not where we thought we were. And our instructor had said, look, we're just going to push and we're going to climb up to the top of this mountain, and from there we'll reassess our situation. And so we had dug deep and we had fought and we had worked and we had climbed one foot in front of the other, and we got to the top of that ridge and we weren't where we thought we were. So we had to go down the other side and up another one. And then again, down another side and up a third one. And a fourth one. And by the time I was looking up at the 5th mountain in front of me, I was having none of it. How do you not know where we are? But she encouraged us and she talked to us and she said, look, we're going to push, we're going to get to the top of this 5th mountain, and I'm really sure this is it. So we pushed. And we fought, and we got to the top, and I was so proud of myself. I got to the top of that thing, and I was looking at her like, hey, we did it, right? And then I read her face. Outstretched before us from the top of that ridge was the largest boulder field I had ever seen. And if you've been backpacking in Wyoming, you might be familiar with this, but a boulder drainage is the worst thing to have to hike across. It's not a hiking path. It's not a just every step in front of the other one. No, you have to go over rocks. Because see, a boulder drainage is a place where all over time, rocks have just gone tumbling down the mountainside and created this giant, huge rock pile. And you've got a 70-pound pack, so you can't just do that easily. Some of them are half a foot in diameter, some of them are 8 feet in diameter, and you've got to negotiate that. Some of them you have to shimmy around, and some of them you have to jump over, and some of them you have to take your pack off and then scoot on your bottom and then grab your pack and then put your pack back on. It's hell. It would have been hell on a good day. If that had been the only thing we'd had that day, it would have been hard. But on this day, there's no way she's going to ask me to go down that way. There's no way. So I looked at her. And she said, we're going to have to cross this boulder drainage, and we're going to make camp right there on that valley below. And she was smart. She didn't stick around to talk about it. She just set off. And the rest of us stood there. And on a trip like this, we all become really close. We normally talk and we joke and we hang out, and nobody said a word. We watched her set off down that thing, and we were like, but one by one, we set out after her. But the rocks, they're all different sizes, and so it takes everybody different amounts of time, and we ended up growing really far apart. And I was nowhere within earshot of anybody in my team. And the wind picked up, and I had just sort of like shimmied around this one rock, and I could see my instructor was this little dot down there. And I got around this one, and I got onto this one, and this cold rain started slapping me in the face. And I looked up to see a 4-foot gap between me and my next rock. And I was done. Took my pack off and sat down. I'm done. This is where I quit. And I sat there, and while I was sitting there on my rock, I got to thinking, what's she going to say to me when she realizes I'm not behind her? What's she going to say when she gets back to me? Because see, here I am, I'm on a rock island in the middle of a boulder drainage on the wrong side of a ridge with a storm blowing in and the sun going down. What's she going to say to me? See, a helicopter, they could call a helicopter. But even if they called a helicopter's not going to pick me up off this boulder drainage. It can't land here. And even if it could, I'm not injured. A pack horse. But even if they sent a pack horse, the pack horse isn't going to get to me on this rock island in the middle of a boulder drainage. But even if it could, we don't get new rations for 3 days. And as I sat there, the thought occurred to me, she's going to have to come back and talk me off this rock. And I can refuse, and I can put up a fight, and I can make her encourage me, and she might offer me an arm, but either way, I'm going to have to walk off this rock. And there the epiphany came. It was so simple and so obvious, and yet to me in that moment, it was deeply profound. I can either make my instructor come back and talk me off this rock, or I can talk myself off this rock. And that was my moment. See, for 5 weeks, we've been in this incredible sermon series called The Infinite Game. And what we've been learning is that there are infinite games, and they really don't have any beginning or a middle or an end, and they don't have winners or losers, and there aren't trophies and prizes. The objective in an infinite game is to stay in it, to continue to participate, to stay engaged. And we've been looking at the first 18 verses of Proverbs chapter 3 as an instruction manual on how to stay in the game of life. And we've learned about being teachable and about being generous and selfless and trusting. All of these are attributes that somebody has, somebody demonstrates when they're winning at the game of life. And today we come to verses 11 and 12. My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, and do not resent his rebuke, because the Lord disciplines those he loves, as a father the son he delights in. You know what? I really wanted an easier verse. Discipline? I got discipline? The word alone makes us cringe. We don't want anybody to tell us what's good for us. We don't want anybody to tell us what to do or to be supervised. Now, sure, we want there to be a world of discipline for other people. That guy who doesn't seem to know the rules of the road, or for that oversharer on the internet who someone needs to tell about decency and what's actually funny. Or while we're making a list, maybe our spouses, because there's almost always something that they're messing up on and should get told about. Right? But us? We don't want discipline for us. That's not a good word. So I really wanted it to be about something else. And I did my homework. I borrowed Pastor Dave's Hebrew lexicon. And I looked up the word for discipline. And I was really hoping it would be something akin to instruction or training, like Navy SEALs training. Or maybe even like the sort of boundaries that we put up in our lives to be more productive, that kind of discipline. So I was really hopeful. And I looked up the word. It's musar, and it means discipline, chastening, correction. My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, chastening, or correction. But it goes on, and do not resent his rebuke. That word sheds light on this too. So I looked up that word. Tochecha in Hebrew. It means rebuke, correction, reproof, punishment, chastisement. My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, his chastening, his correction, and do not resent his rebuke, correction, reproof, punishment, or chastisement. See, as much as I wanted it to, Proverbs 3, verse 11 just doesn't shrink back. It doesn't shy away from this idea of disciplinary suffering. And actually, the writer of Proverbs 3 also fully understands that we aren't going to like it. He's saying, don't do what you're going to be tempted to do. He knows that our natural response to this kind of affliction is to resist it, to despise it, to reject it. But I want to submit to you this morning that there's a better way. That this kind of discipline, as harsh as it seems, is actually a good thing. That it's for our benefit. I think that's what the author of Proverbs 3 is saying. He's saying if you're going to stay engaged in the game of life, if you're going to be in it to win it, you're going to have to not just accept God's discipline, but embrace it. Use it. See, surrendering to that process is winning. Life is hard. God does discipline us. But there's a better way. The writer of Proverbs 3 is suggesting that there's something other than resentment and spite. there's a way that'll actually get us off our rock. It'll actually get us home. But it's our choice. We get to decide. Proverbs 3 gives us 3 reasons to surrender to God's discipline. The first is because of God's confidence in you. Verse 12 goes on, "For whom the Lord loves, he disciplines." That verb means to correct, but it also means to prove or to argue. See, when God disciplines us, it's not just correcting us, it's proving us, inviting us to argue, to wrestle with, to work out the problem on our own and arrive at the right conclusion on our own. Because of his confidence in us. His way is actually a much more sophisticated and much more elegant way than to just hand us the answers. It's an affirmation of his confidence in our ability, in our capability. He doesn't just fix us or let us have it our way. He's actually using those moments to sharpen us. Sitting on that rock, not having anybody there to hold my hand through that process, but just being in it and wrestling with it and figuring that out on my own, that was a really important moment for me. I'm stronger for it. But I'm not going to lie, it took me a long time. I didn't hop up to my feet right away. I needed time to make peace with this. And I don't remember what all I said to myself. I just know I didn't shut up. I just kept talking to myself until I finally did take that next step. And I did take the next one after that, and the one after that. And I remember watching, because my buddy John was just up ahead of me, and I was able to watch him reach the end of that boulder field. And I remember watching as he put that first foot onto grass. And he dropped his pack and hit his knees and started sobbing. And I thought, yes, we have fought for this. We weren't just plucked up and put on at the end. This means something to me. Because of God's confidence in us that we can work it through. The second reason to surrender to God's discipline is because of God's plan for you. Because see, we hate to admit it, but it's the hard stuff that grows us. It's in the hardship and the suffering and the correction and the tight moments when we grow, when we change, when we understand that it's actually for our growth, when it's actually for our good, when we surrender to that process, we don't mind the discomfort. We're actually kind of okay with the pain because we understand that it's equipping us for great things. See, our day wasn't over at the end of that boulder field. We still had to cook a dinner and clean the pots and pans and put up a tent and hang the bear canister. And then around midnight, our instructor woke us up out of a dead sleep to assume the lightning position until the storm passed. Lightning position is to minimize the impact if you're struck by lightning, and so they ask you to balance on your tippy toes and hug your knees. It was torture to get up out of my sleeping bag, up out of my sleep, so that I could balance on my beat up toes, hugging my knees, listening to that rain and that wind just rip at the sides of our shelter. And we got up at 5:30 again to another day of pushing hard because we weren't done. But I turned 21 a different person. I had learned a new skill, the skill of talking myself off a rock. And that skill has been so great. It turns out it's not just a boulder drainage in Wyoming where you need that skill. I have talked myself through all kinds of stuff. I talked myself through law school and the bar exam, through a marathon that almost took me down and took one of my toenails, through 3 childbirths and the parenting that followed that, through the anxiety of trial. Last week, I'm just talking myself off my rock. Just brush your teeth, Steph. Next step. But see, God knew. God knew if he just plucked me off my rock, I wouldn't have learned that. But I'm being equipped for things, and you're being equipped for things. He has a plan for us. The third reason to surrender to God's discipline is because of God's love for you. It says, for whom the Lord loves, he disciplines. He brings us to the end of ourselves, not so that we fail, but so that we finally see that there was more to us than we thought. That there's more to him than we thought. He delights in us. I love to picture that. He delights in us even when, especially when, we are wrestling the hell out of it. When we're still giving it all we've got, when we're up against a wall. I am fully convinced that there are things he wants to show us. There are places he wants to take us that are only on the other side of some tough life lessons. That he can only get us there on the other side of our surrendering to that process. See, 9 strangers started that course together, and only 8 finished. 1 girl quit in that first week, and we tried. We tried to talk to her about not quitting, about sticking it out, but it was like every mosquito bite and every blister just drove her deeper into her misery. And I remember watching her leave the course on the back of a pack horse. That sort of lazy rocking back and forth of that horse's backside with her on it. So they made this painfully slow exit toward headquarters. And I just remember feeling so sad. I was sad for her story. I was sad because she missed out on some really great stuff. See, she wasn't there at the time that we reached the top of the Continental Divide. And we worked so hard to get up to it. And when we finally dropped our packs, where our sweaty back was, where the pack had been, the wind hit that spot and it felt so good. It was so rewarding. She missed that. And when we got to the top, we actually found one of those cairns there, those stacks of rocks that hikers leave, and there was a thermos buried inside. And when we opened the thermos, there were all these notes from different hikers from decades before who had gone that way. And so we scribbled out ones of our own, and we shoved them in there, and we read others, and we sang together. She missed that too. And there was this one time where the guys just intentionally shot off the bear spray inside the tent to see what it would be like. And they came tumbling out of there like bees out of a hive, just yelling and crying, and it was awful until hours later when everybody had recovered, and then it was hilarious. And we just laughed and laughed about that until our sides hurt. Or about the trout that we caught in that crystal clear blue lake. Or about the sunrises and the snow and the hot drinks when you were cold. She missed all that. And the way that first hamburger tasted when we were done. So good. She missed that too. See, these are the things that we miss in the great adventures and in the small ones of the infinite game when we reject discipline. When we're so busy being resentful of what's happening out there that we lose out on the greater work that's being done in here. See, surrendering isn't quitting. It's embracing the process. It's investing in it. It's trusting that a loving Father actually does know how to bring out the best in us. It's recognizing that it was never about our circumstances, about the hardship itself. It was always about us and Him. He has enough confidence in us. He has enough love for us to give us the choice. Our response is up to us. The writer of Proverbs 3 knew that, but he challenged us to take a higher road. See, in the end, we write our stories with our choices. It's a choose your own adventure. What's your move?